what I always do.
right now with my
Awesome. All right, go for it. Okay, I want to welcome everybody. My coworkers have not made it up, and they might make it up by the time I finish here. But I'm Amy Corey with Western Title. I am a sales executive here at Western and have been in the industry for, I think, going on 8 years. Love the industry and actually have had the honor of working with Melissa.
Your entire career.
Yes, I have. We moved at the same around the same time.
I started doing this almost 8 years ago. It'll be 8 years in May.
Awesome. That's fine. June, I think, actually.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yes,
No, I don't know. Maybe I'm not. I'm going to be counting my years wrong. Oh, is that a year?
Yep, that would be 8
Okay.
years in June. Yeah. We're already counting at 8 years. You know how you go forward, not backwards. It's been longer. COVID.
Longer.
COVID.
But I have a couple of our team members from Western Title in the room, so I'd like them to go ahead and introduce themselves. We have one that just joined us August 1st. Maya, you want to go ahead?
I'm Maya. I'm sales executive. I've been here for 3 months, so I'm really official now. I previously was in real estate for a year and a half, so just a little bit of real knowledge of real estate. So yeah, welcome, guys.
Tanya?
Oh, Tanya Zilke, escrow.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Been around a long time. Super old.
I've had the honor of working with Tanya most of my career in the industry, except for, I think, 4 months. So, yeah. So I'm excited here to introduce Melissa. She's here to talk about farming for investor listings with 1031 exchange. I've heard this is an excellent class, so get ready to take notes. If you haven't already, help yourself to some snacks and some soda in the refrigerator, waters as well. Please do. Thank you for joining us.
Can I just do a little feedback?
Cool.
So anytime you have a client, a seller or buyer thinking about doing a 1031 exchange, I immediately let Melissa will call up immediately, have conversation about what they're doing, what they're trying to do, and how to try to make it seamless for them. So use her as much as possible.
Thanks. I had a happy hour with some ladies in the commercial industry last night, and then one gal goes, I love sending calls to you because you make it so clear and it's a decisive answer. I said, yes, I don't talk in hypotheticals because I'm not an attorney. Attorneys tend to like to say things hypothetically. I was joking that I met with 3 attorneys that were selling their own building and were talking to me about doing their own exchange, and the one guy kept saying, so hypothetically, I finally started laughing. I go, when it's for yourself, I don't think you need to ask me hypothetical questions. It's all good. Like, we don't need to. I was just totally laughing. So, a little bit about me. So, I've been doing, how am I doing in your screen there? Am I moving too much?
No, you're good. No worries.
You will get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, but I'm going to do like a little overview that isn't in the presentation, but I think is a good precursor to the class, okay? So I've been doing this for, like we were saying, just shy of 8 years. I was a real estate broker for 14 years prior to that, listing in both Washington and Oregon as a managing broker and principal broker. During that time, I did close to 1,000 transactions. I had a real estate team. I was an REO agent during the downturn of the market. Yes, that was a fun time. Never want to go back. Though I do get a lot of BPO requests again. That's interesting. So that should tell us where our market's going. So that's not what we're talking about today, but that is another area you might want to utilize is getting lists of pre-foreclosures and distress. Because if they're anything like they were in the previous market, they stick their head in the sand.
And we
The
send out,
foreclosure's not going away.
yeah, if you want to get on the list, let Amy know because it goes out once a week.
Yeah.
And you can actually see how much it's increasing.
They would be a good way. It seems like maybe predatory, but think of it more in the lines that you're helping them versus being predatory, because they need to have someone help them understand that this is going to happen. You are probably going to lose your home, and you're way better off selling it and taking money, because most people are not underwater. They're just delinquent. So, anyway, so I had a real estate team. I did bank owned, so initially Countrywide and then Bank of America when Countrywide bought them did so many BPOs, that was like an income on its own. That's how many. We probably made close to $100,000 a year just doing BPOs at $50 a piece. You do the math. It was like, whew. And then I had my own brokerage that I eventually sold to another brokerage. So that was kind of my background. So with that, I wanted you to kind of start thinking about, if I'm going to do any marketing, let's talk about the basics of it. The KISS theory is always good. Keep it simple, stupid. All right? You don't want to get overcomplicated. You want a call to action. Okay? If whatever you're putting out there doesn't get them to reach out to you, you're wasting money. Right? So the intent of your messaging is that you want them to reach out to you. So you have to get an idea of what that is. So keep it simple, have a call to action, and be consistent. And now's really a really good time to put together your marketing plan for 2025. Going backwards, 2025. I cannot hardly believe it's 2025. Okay, so I want you to think about what you want to do. You went to Tom Ferry's conference, right, in February? So I went to that, and there are a couple of things I want to share with you that I got from the Tom Ferry event. And one very key element, which I agree from my own mistakes, is plan out your year of marketing. Plan out the entire year of what you're going to do. Have a plan. And design whatever it is you're going to do for the year. So, like, a mistake I made was I did postcards, and I did 6 months of postcards, and then when it came up to do the next 6 months of postcards, it kind of fell by the wayside because I got busy with business, which is, of course, the idea, but you need to have that consistency. So design your entire year up front, so then it's just on autopilot and easy to do. Okay, so that would be one of the key elements I'd really pay attention to as you're thinking what you want to do. The other thing that he brought up that I thought was really interesting, if we think about real estate like a car race, okay? So in a race, you don't win in the straightaway. You win on the curve. So to win on the curve, which is the kind of market we have, what you want to do is do more and do what others are not doing to pass your competitor. What he was saying is the people who did that in our last curve, which would have been in 08, those are a lot of your mega agents now that are doing a lot of volume, because instead of pulling back and saving money and doing less, they powered through that time and came out on the other side better than ever. Okay? So one of those things, it's very easy to fall into the trap of social media. It's not a bad way to do it, but it's not the only way to market to people. Right? So TikTok has a place, Instagram has a place, YouTube videos, Reels, all of that's necessary. But don't forget print. Now, other than in the last couple of weeks, which all of a sudden, of course, it's right before the election, so now I have a lot of mail. But I haven't really had a lot of mail. I've noticed that it's gone up sizably. But if you think about it, up until the last week or so, you probably don't have a lot of mail. Postcards aren't a bad way to market to people, especially if you're going to somebody who isn't really a big social media person. And they're actually going to look at it. Whereas in the past, if I had a big stack of junk mail, it just went into the circular file with everything else. Also keep in mind, one of the big mistakes I think people make with marketing materials as far as postcards, they do the just listed, just sold. Well, touching somebody twice doesn't do much for you. You have to have some consistency and touch them more than once. So if I'm just doing a just listed, just sold of the 200 homes closest to the one I'm listing, it's not going to really get me any real traction. It takes more than that. Now, one of the most interesting concepts I heard, which I loved, was a white postcard with a QR code on the front of it that just said, check out what your neighbor is doing. I was like, okay, you want to go with simple messaging? And I was like, wow, how creative is that? And yet it's super simple. Now, in this case, we're not talking about your neighbor, we're not talking about the property you just listed next door, right? We're talking about investors, but it could be, check out what other investors are doing. Check out how I work with investors, something like that. And the QR code's powerful because what happens? They click on it and it comes to my information and I collect that data, right? And the beautiful thing about the social media part is you can take that database that you are going to hone down from what we're thinking about today as far as what I want to have for a target market and who I want to farm to. You can get additional information and pour that into social media and be in their feed. So you're in their feed, you're mailing them. The next thing you know, they think you're the only real estate person in the world because they're seeing you again and again and again. You wonder how sometimes your friends in the business end up in your feed. That's how that works, right? So work to have that message together and have a call to action. And I'm going to leave you with one more thing and then I'm going to get into the material. So I believe I was probably the original buyer's agent. So when I started in 2003, I worked for a broker that was a listing agent that when someone would call him on his listing, he'd go show it. If they wanted to make an offer, great, he'd double end it. If they didn't, he'd say, thanks, have a nice day. Because he didn't have time. So I came to work for him as a buyer's agent. But through the time of working with him and everything, he said something to me once that it was kind of like the fingers down the chalkboard kind of thing. Still does that to me, but I will tell you, I believe it's true. He said to me, we are not motivated by reward. We are motivated by avoiding pain. And I really hated that idea because that's not the way I'm a positive person, typically speaking, and I like to think of that. But then I kind of went back to my kids who are both way bigger than me and in their 20s. And I just remember when they were teenagers and I tried all kinds of things. Was it I paid you for good grades or this or that, or you were grounded if you were bad? Guess which one they liked better? You would think that they would have went for the money, for the grades, right? It was avoiding being in, detention or grounded. So it's really true. So I say that to have you think, what is a pain point for an investor? The moment you figure out what a pain point is for an investor is the moment they're going to reach out to you because you are positioning yourself to be the solution to their problem. Just like the person who's going to lose their home to foreclosure, you're helping them avoid their problem, okay? So be the solution provider for the investor, but what you have to understand is what is their pain point and how do you figure out how to be the solution to that pain point. And if you have a uniform message, but you talk about different pain points over time, once you hit their trigger, that's when they're going to reach out to you, okay? By the way, this class assumes you know about 1031 exchanges. It does not get into the 45 deadline, the 180 days. I do talk about what qualifies, and I talk about a few of those things to understand, but it makes the assumption that you know the basics, okay? So I'm just warning you up front. I guess I didn't say any warning up front. I'm warning you now, okay? So, now so you guys can't see this if I'm standing here. I'm going to be overhearing. I hate being recorded, by the way. All right, one of the best kept marketing secrets. I did a 1-hour YouTube video with somebody and I couldn't even watch it myself. It's like, oh my God, it's so boring. But I actually had someone call me up and say, I watched your video. I'm like, you watched the entire hour of that YouTube? And she goes, yes, it was so great. But I have a few more questions. I'm like, I cannot believe you watched that whole hour. I can't even watch the whole hour. Okay, one of the best marketing secrets, because it is the greatest wealth building tool in the entire tax code. And remember that the biggest generational wealth growing mechanism that we have is real estate. It is the best growth for generations to go forward is real estate. It's also one of the most underused part of the tax code, making it your secret weapon. okay? That's why you wanna use this as your way to market to those investors. So when we're targeting the investor market, they tend to be less emotional, and let's be real, this doesn't make them less demanding, okay? It just means that it's not about the warm and fuzzy, it's about, does it pencil out, okay? They're motivated, remember, they, just like your homeowner that's buying, you gotta buy a new home, you know, they're selling, they're probably gonna buy too. Well, if I'm doing an exchange, I have to buy, that's the whole idea, I'm selling and I'm buying, which means multiple transactions. Well, with the interest rates, your investors tend to have cash. Now, the market obviously, as you well know, didn't originally adjust like they anticipated with the price, interest increasing, right? So with the interest rates going up, they really anticipated values to drop. Well, they didn't, because it's called supply and demand, right? It's not your compensation that drove up home prices. It is supply and demand, like anything, right? If I have a lack of supply and I have a demand, values are either going to go up or stay steady, even with increased interest rates. So I say that because your investors kind of sat on, especially your cash ones, kind of sat on the sidelines wondering when the market was going to crash because of high interest rates. It has definitely seen some signs of softening, and we're definitely seeing some things sitting on the market longer and values coming up, but I think that's more when you have a seller that's not being realistic and think that they're going to get multiple offers and sell it for hundreds of $1,000s and more, like it was happening at one time, right? But I am seeing cash coming out to play, and there's a lot of cash investors. Not all cash, but we are definitely seeing creative deals too. My poor escrow officers are like, there's another seller carried note, and they're talking about an exchange. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Tools so basically, I want you guys to come back to your Western team because they have tools available to help you, one, come down with your market, who you want to target, okay, with certain information. Create those tools and do a multiple prong approach with email, social media, print, to have a powerful message to get people to reach out to you. That's the whole idea, right? Okay, so there's stages of investing. Well, maybe you're interested in somebody that's just starting out. Now, this is not the guy I'm talking about. Hey, I'm working with 10 different people, and whoever brings me the deal of the century, that's my person. I'm like, if I find the deal of the century, I'm buying it, dude. I'm not sending it to you, okay? And of course, now that they have to even sign a buyer broker agreement to even go see anything, that's probably not quite as prevalent, but I can tell you, I have hung up on more than one guy that thought that it was just whoever, you know, you had no value, right? There was no loyalty, no value, waste of time. These are people that already have inventory, they already have properties, right? Because we're looking for listings. So these are people that already have investments, but they're newer, right? They're starting to grow it. Convert it to cash flow. So if we remember like kind, which I think I talk about in a minute, it isn't land to land, single family home to single family home. It's real estate to real estate for investment purposes or use in business or trade. So they can have land, which you guys have farmland out here. They can exchange that for income producing real estate. Doesn't have to be more vacant land. Okay, so that could be an area where you're looking at maybe there's property that's good for a developer or for other purposes. Now keep in mind, I will tell you, even if you're thinking, well, developers aren't developing right now, that doesn't mean they aren't getting ready. They are buying the land, they are getting it ready, they are waiting for the difference between the cost of materials and what they can sell it for to adjust to make it worthwhile, right? So right now, they can't build it for what people want to pay, but they're getting ready. So they are still buying the land and holding on to it. Exit strategy. Hint here, I should probably put an asterisk by that. That is your greatest pain point right there. What is my exit strategy? How do I get out of being a landlord? That is the #1 trigger right there.
It would be nice if we could do a query on corporations where the managers were over 60.
Yeah, they don't give you demographics.
And then we could just like go after them, because they're trying to think about their kids and their grandkids, and they wanna disperse the funds and.
So I already said that like-kind is simply, I want you to think of it as simply real estate to real estate for investment purposes or use in business or trade. The like-kind element that they need to meet is their intended use, not the property type. So as long as what they're selling and buying is for investment purposes, it qualifies. And vacant land for its appreciation qualifies. It does not have to be income producing. Okay? Now, dealer properties do not qualify. So a dealer property would be your developers and the flippers. Because their intention is to resell for profit, they do not qualify for a 1031 exchange, okay? So that's not the client, that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for the person holding it more as a rental, okay? So when we're talking to them, we're looking at these two qualifications, holding and intent. Now, holding is a gray area in the tax code as it's not stipulated, but the generally accepted rule of thumb through case law is going to be 2 tax returns. So I didn't say 2 years, I said 2 returns, and most advisors would tell your clients they'd want to see at least 13 months because of the difference between short-term and long-term capital gains. Short-term's a year or less, long-term's a year and a day. My true test is intention. What is their intention? Their intention needs to be that they're holding it for investment purposes or use in business or trade. Now, what does not qualify as a primary residence unless I consider a portion of it as investment. So how many of you have a home office? Do you write it off? Guess what? That's for investment purposes. So you could exchange your home office. Not gonna do it, but you could, okay? Primary residence, you wanna definitely make a note on this. Primary residence falls under the 121 tax code. And that tax code says as long as you own it and live in it for 2 of the last 5 years, you get an exclusion of gain of $250 as an individual, $500 as a couple. Okay? It doesn't say anything about buying another property, and it's an exclusion, meaning it's a better deal. I'm getting rid of it. 1031 exchange, I'm deferring. Okay? And I will talk about mixed use exchanges because you guys have a lot of opportunity for mixed use here in the area. Secondary homes. Secondary home is anything that I have for personal recreational use, and maybe I rent it out incidentally, but it's not really intended for investment purposes. So if I have a place out at Bandon Dunes specifically, I'm not allowed to rent it out to others. That is a secondary home. It does not qualify for an exclusion of gain as a secondary home, nor does it qualify for a 1031 for investment purposes. I guess they figure out if you can afford to have more than one home, you can afford to pay the taxes when you sell it, okay? So, we already talked about inventory, and the test is at the time of the exchange. Now, I will say there is one time when holding is specified, and that is if it's a short-term rental. It is a full 24 months, and that is to prove intention, okay? Or conversion into a primary residence. Do not be the broker that tells your client, oh, just go ahead and move in whenever you want. It's called tax fraud, and people have gone to federal prison, and yes, the IRS can figure it out that you live there. It was just like you guys, we get together, right? We all talk the same language, so we tell horror stories. We were talking about the favorite question is how does the IRS know? And my friend goes, they can tell from your phone if you committed murder. Do you not think they can figure out if you were staying in something you're not supposed to be? They can, by all kinds of different means, okay? So, here's another area I want to cover, which is what does a fully tax deferred exchange look like? Okay, so there's 2 things, equal or greater value, and the second is all their cash back in. Common misconception is I either have to reinvest just my gain or the cash proceeds after the loan's paid off. Well, I do need to put all my cash proceeds off into the replacement, but the debt does not reduce my replacement value. So if I'm selling for $500,000 and I have a $200,000 loan, I have $300 in cash, so I need to have $300 go back into the new property, and I need to buy $500,000 of real estate. Don't get too hung up on debt to ratio, because if I buy for $600, well, I need $300 and more to buy than what I have in cash. So I can either borrow another 300,000, or bring in cash, or a combination of the two. So if someone says, well, I have 300 in cash, but I want to buy for 1.5 million, and the lender wants $500,000, well, I need to bring in another 200. Okay? You can always replace debt with more cash, but not vice versa. So if somebody has a small loan, say $70,000 or something like that, and they don't want to get a new loan on the new property, that's fine. I can bring in more cash to offset the loan just paid off. If I don't replace the debt, that's called a trade down or a buy down, and that portion is taxable. We call that mortgage boot, and that's the toughest one, guys, because what happens is they get no money and then they have to pay taxes on it. They like that one, right? They're like, wait, I have to pay taxes on paying a loan off? And the answer is like, yes. Yes, you do. Be careful too when they say, oh, I don't have that much cash equity. There's no gain, no gain. It's not the cash equity that's the taxable amount. It's the gain. The gain's the difference, I think I get into, maybe not. Gain is the difference between the cost basis and the sales price, not the cash equity. So someone could have stripped out equity over time and done a cash out refi and took out money and have a ton of gain but very little cash coming out, or vice versa. They can have a lot of cash coming out but not have very much gain because of what their cost basis is in the property. So cost basis and the sales price is the gain, not the cash they walk away with. So when I have someone start talking to me about their cash equity, I realize they think that's their taxable gain. Now depreciation is a benefit your clients get, okay? They get to write off the improvements. It's 27 and a half years for residential, including multifamily. It's 39 years for commercial. So in this example, they're saying, hey, I bought for 700. I take out 150 for the land because we never depreciate the land, we only appreciate the land, okay? I take that, I say, okay, 550 divided out over 27 and a half years, that's a $20,000 a year tax benefit, okay? Has a little note here, it says it's taxed whether it's taken or not. So, 6 years ago, again, COVID effect, I never remember the 4 years that seemed to have disappeared, right? Like the rest of us are like, how'd that happen? I can't believe it was 5 years ago. That's the weird thing, right? They're like, oh, I was teaching classes in Spokane in this broker, and I remember because she was sitting right up front. She wasn't afraid. And she said, maybe she should have been, but she wasn't. She's out there. She goes, my former CPA said, why take depreciation if I have to repay it? So the only part of that sentence was good was he said, former CPA. Like, why do you have a tax advisor that's telling you not to take a tax benefit available to you, and the IRS assumes that you've taken it, and you have to repay or recapture that, whether you took it or not? So to have somebody tell you not to take it, and then the nasty surprise is you get to recapture that at 25%. So always take the tax benefit. And sometimes, by the way, that tells me whether or not someone's really treating it as an investment or not, because they haven't taken appreciation. Okay, so here are some taxes we're looking at. So capital gains tax is typically 15 to 20%. State of Oregon sees it as ordinary income, 9.9%. Depreciation recapture, which I just talked about, that's at 25%. And then there's this thing called the net investment income tax, or the NIIT tax, formerly known as the Medicaid tax. If the gain with their income is over 200 as an individual or 250 as a couple, this kicks in at 3.8%. Then I was just talking to somebody the other day who's selling his Vancouver property in Washington, but lives in the city of Portland. And I said, well, you have all that, plus you have the city of Portland and Multnomah County tax too, on top of everything else. Yeah. Okay. So this is just showing you the power of doing an exchange. So in this example, they're saying, okay, I've got $1 million after my closing costs. I am going to buy more real estate, but I'm going to go ahead and pay the taxes of $250,000, which, by the way, is a drop in the bucket. It's not much, honestly. My buying power, assuming a 75% LTV, is $3 million. Well, if I just get to retain that $250,000 and I don't have to pay taxes on it, leaving me with a full $1 million to reinvest, my buying power goes up by $1 million just by keeping $250,000 available. That's the power. And this is next to nothing. I was talking to somebody again, did really well, had about $900,000 worth of gain, $600,000 worth of gain in a really short period of time, like 4 years. He bought at the right time, right? And he had City, Portland, Multnomah County, State of Oregon, federal, all of that. I figured that by the time it was done, he had over $300,000 of taxes. So it adds up really quickly. Okay, so non-tax reasons. Well, diversify. So again, like I said, it isn't like vacant land to vacant land, single family to single family. It also isn't one-to-one. So I can sell one property and buy multiple, or I can sell multiple and buy one. Like this one, I have these two guys that are selling 50 single family rentals. Yeah, 50, not 50, 50. They don't want to sell it in a portfolio either, which I think is kind of silly. They don't like the idea how much they think they have to discount. But they're planning on selling all 50 single family rentals that they own free and clear and buying one apartment complex for $20 million, all cash.
Within a small amount of time.
It's gonna be fun.
I mean, I'm just finishing that sentence, I'm guessing, right?
So timing is really crucial. So the plan is that once the first property closes, the clock starts on the exchange, right? From that point, they have 45 days to identify that apartment complex from the first one closing. So they're gonna need that in contract. And they have to close on said apartment within 180 days of that first house closing. So the plan is everything that can close before they have to close on the apartment will be a forward exchange. Anything remaining will be a reverse exchange. And then they have another 180 days to sell any of the remaining trailing properties.
Those are my favorite.
I know, we're gonna give it to her. I don't know who's gonna have fun on that one. I don't know where they're buying, but we have it all laid out. So the moment that first property is in contract, we're ready to go. But they have it, because they have to evict everybody too, because they're not gonna sell it as a portfolio. And they have to get all of them out of the market. You can't like wait. So they have to evict all 50 properties and get them on the market to then time it wise and find an apartment.
And do all their inspections.
That's why I was thinking selling it as a portfolio, even if you got a discount, if you look at all the costs associated with lost rent, revenue, getting it on the market, doing all that, and paying me to do a reverse exchange and sell 50 properties, we're probably gonna charge close to $15,000 just for them to do the exchange by the time it's said and done. I told him, I said, I can't even quote you.
But that's cheap.
So when yeah, I know. I go, I can't quote you until we know how things are shaking out. I said, we'll make it reasonable, but I can't even tell you quite what it's gonna be because we don't know what's gonna go where. So, it'll be fun. I'm excited because complicated is my middle name. It is, for many reasons. Okay, maybe you wanna find the investor that's not local. So they can run a report for you where the mailing address isn't just not at that address, but also out of state, right? So maybe you want to focus on helping them move their investments closer to home because they tend to self-manage. So they may have relocated themselves to Arizona with all of our other friends that are in Arizona.
In their 60s.
It's like everybody I know, I live in Vancouver, I swear, half the real estate agents I know either live there or they're half-time. It's weird. Okay, it's too hot for me. Exchange into a better cash flow. So taking that cash equity, unlock that equity to move into a better performing asset. People make the mistake of sitting on equity and not really having it make more money for them, which they should be doing. So new amortization schedule with, if they buy up in value, not only do they start that depreciation schedule over, they do it with a higher value as long as they buy up in value. Exchange for estate planning. That's another big pain point is how to handle transitioning that to the family. That's a big area of challenge. So focus the farm. So maybe you're wanting to look at condos because the HOA fees have gotten enormous, or maybe the HOA is changing the CCNRs and they can't rent it out the way they wanted to anymore. So that could be a way to get them into maybe a single family rental versus a condo. Again, we already talked about the bare land, turn it into income. Maybe you want more experienced investor. Maybe you'll have them run a report where they have more than 5 properties or more than 10 properties or whatever you think would work to get them to consolidate. I wouldn't go for the guy with the 50. That one's a little crazy. Again, we talked about this already, educate them about local market conditions, because if somebody's been away long enough, they may think that assessed value is market value, right? Because in some parts of the country, assessed value is market value. Well, traditionally we are not. I mean, yes, they'll give you market and assessed, but it still isn't really necessarily market value. So you could use, Amy, what's the program you guys have where they pay for it, but they can send out a report that gives people the market report, like the value of the properties? Is that HomeBot?
Yeah,
HomeBot. So you could get them to sign up for your HomeBot so they can see what their market value is of the property. Okay? Bringing it back closer to home. Long time. So if someone's owned it for 20 plus years, they're close to or fully depreciated, so they've lost that tax benefit. If they exchange into a new property, they get to restart that depreciation schedule over at year 1. Now they get that tax benefit again. Okay? And like I said, if they buy up at a higher amount, maybe looking for that exit strategy. If I had somebody who bought 17 to the very beginning of 20, they've got a lot of equity in that property. Okay, one really good thing that they did when we had the really low interest rates, even though that's the big struggle right now, is everybody refinanced or bought and has a really low interest rate. I would be one. I'm not selling anytime soon. Right? Why? Unless I have to, I'm not. So if you look at it, at least they didn't have people strip out equity. Now the cash out refis are going crazy right now because people are using them to pay really high consumer debt off. I had somebody that had almost 30 lines of credit that they did on a refi. Yeah. Bet you anything they're gonna jack those back up again, right? I mean, they never learn. They just use, my sister is guilty of using her house as a piggy bank, right? She does that all the time. I love her, but I'm like, please don't redo it again. Okay, but they have all this equity. So another thing that you can have the gals here do for you is run a report with those, non-owner occupied. They can give you an idea how much equity they have in those properties. So you can get it to be really focused on who do you want to market to. You want people to have money in that property. They can tell you approximately how much they owe on it, plus what the approximate market value is on it. So you can go, hey, I don't want anything where they have less than, say, 30 or 40% equity, right? Get really specific in who you want to market to. Okay, so I mentioned about how the one holding is more specific. So the IRS wanted to clarify the difference between a short-term rental and a secondary home, okay? Because there is a difference between the two. So revenue procedure, RevProc, stands for revenue procedure. 2008 is the year it happened, and then 16 is it was number 16. So this was talking about conversions and short-term rentals. So they have to own it for a full 24 months. They have to rent it out to non-family members at fair market rent at least 14 days a year. That's not the problem. It's the limitation of personal use, okay? That is 14 days a year or 10% of what they rent it, whichever is greater. So if I rent it out 300 days, I can use it 30 days. Now, time there for maintenance if overnight travel is required does not count against their personal usage, but every tax advisor I've ever talked to gets really itchy about that, okay? That is an audit trap all day long. They want you to have full-on record, log, everything, and again, it comes down to my phone. That was another one we were talking about, Amazon deliveries to my vacation rental that I'm not at. How about that my grocery shopping and I bought dinner, but there's no accommodations. I guess I'm staying at my vacation rental I wasn't supposedly doing, right? So they need to be really careful about overuse. Because if they get audited, they're going to say, no, it doesn't qualify. It's simply a secondary home that you incidentally rent out, okay? Now, say I want to buy a primary. So it's a two-step process. I have to rent it out at least 2 years before I move into it, again, preserving my intention, okay? They also need to hold it for a minimum of 5 years before they sell it. If they sell it before 5 years have passed, they will owe all of the taxes. They get no exclusion of gain. So what happened is the 121 tax code originated in the mid-90s. Prior to that, the previous tax code was a deferral, just like a 1031. So, and it kind of has still stuck, because even when I was a real estate broker, I always thought, well, if they bought a new home, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have anything to do with buying another home. It has to be 2 of 5 years. Well, previously, I just had to buy another primary residence within 2 years of an equal or greater value. Well, they changed it, I think, because they were paying attention occasionally, that when people were getting into the end of their life, they either weren't buying another home because they were going into care, or they wanted to downsize or whatever. And at that point then, when I'm at my lowest income age, right, now I had to pay all the taxes. So now it's an exclusion. So what happened was the investors were like, hey man, I can move into my rental for 2 years and get an exclusion of gain. So that's what they started doing. IRS realized they had a loophole, so they changed it. So now it is a proration of my gain is eligible based on how many total years of ownership to time and qualified use as the primary residence. So they don't get 100%. So I always use the example that I rent it out for 2 years, I live in it for 3 years, I sell it at 5. So I've lived in it for 3 of the 5 years, or 60% of my ownership's been in qualified use. I get 60% of my gain is eligible for exclusion, not to exceed the max of $250 or $500. So the other portion is still taxable. So if someone has $1 million in gain, they don't want to go into something they're going to move into and then plan to move out, because they can only at most get away with $500,000 at the best, right? And the rest is also going to be taxable. So there are times when it doesn't make sense. And here's another misconception. I have a new class coming up called Common Misconception and Mistakes that investors make on 1031 exchanges. Another one is they think that eventually at some point in time there's no taxes. No. There's no magical holding pill that all of a sudden I wake up one day and I can sell it and there's no gain. I can die. That's the ultimate exit strategy, not my tax liability at that point, right? That's my only way out, okay? Yeah. Combining it. Okay, so I talked about mixed use. I said, okay, you guys got a home office, right? So when I talk to people on the phone about mixed use, I always use the duplex as my example because it's such an easy visual for people, right? But in this example, I'm using a fourplex. So 3 units are investment, 1 unit is my primary residence. So 75% of this is investment, 25% is my primary residence. So 25% of the proceeds come to me, 75% goes to the exchange. As long as I meet the criteria of living there for at least 2 of 5 years, I get an exclusion of gain of $250 or $500 on that 25%. The other 75%, the gain can be deferred by doing an exchange. Be careful with this idea. People go, well, I don't have $500,000 in gains, so I don't need to do anything. Only that 25% qualifies for the exclusion of gain. The other 75% is not qualified to get an exclusion of gain. So they'll sell it thinking I don't have $500,000, but 75% of it wasn't eligible for the exclusion, and it's taxable. So here's a great example. I had a gal living in Hillsborough. The city of Hillsborough deemed her real estate now industrial. Shocker. So they're buying her 4 acres with her primary home for $4 million. Well, she only gets a 250 exclusion. So and her husband bought the property in like 64 for like $14,000. They built the home, and he had passed away, so there's a little bit of stuff up and all that kind of stuff. But if she didn't do an exchange, that was a huge, huge tax hit, right? But because the land itself qualifies for an exchange, we're able to allocate a value. So we allocated $1 million of that as primary residence, which some of it still would be taxable. The other $3 million was eligible for the rest of the land, and she exchanged that into a triple net property in the Prineville area. So she went from appreciation in her primary residence, bare land, into an income producing asset, and a triple net is like as hands-free as you can get. It's a great way to do it, okay? Now otherwise she would have just had to pay taxes, which would have been stinky, okay? So it doesn't have to be clear like this. It doesn't need to be separate tax lots. It doesn't need to be separate transactions. See my notes? They only want a reasonable allocation of value. Okay, they don't require an appraisal or anything. So typically if it's like this gal where it wasn't really, like this, I already know 75% of it's already been allocated, right? Because I'm depreciating the improvements. I already know how much is being allocated. But with this vacant land and I'm just sitting on it, there's nothing happened. So I go to the real estate broker and I say, okay, how much is acreage going versus the house? And we'll separate it out, and then we run it by their tax advisor. Say, okay, this is what we came up with an idea because of the broker's professional opinion of value. And sometimes I'll make some adjustments. And they can either sell out of a mixed use and buy single use, or go single use into mixed use, which is tougher. Because if I'm selling this for $500,000 and I want, let's say I'm selling a single use, like a single family home for 500, and I want to buy a duplex, well, I need $1 million duplex, right? I need 500 for the investment portion. So going into mixed use is a little bit tougher, but it can be done. Like I had some people, they were going to wait the 2 years to move in, but we were able to establish, because they were buying some acreage, which was going to be for their landscaping business, so, and it had acreage and all this good stuff, and the house needed work and was minor. We were able to establish that there were enough value in the land to exchange into that portion, and so they didn't have to wait 2 years to move in because we were able to allocate enough into the land as being the replacement. So we could just pay the taxes, but I'm going to tell you that's a rough one. Now sometimes, I know this sounds like a little weird, but sometimes I have to give people permission to pay the taxes. They don't want to, but sometimes they just don't want to do what they have to do, and it's not always a big number. So if they just they want to buy a primary residence, or they want to do something. I had somebody who had vacant land, and they were going to build a primary home on it. They didn't. Well, in a short period of time, they had like $200,000 of appreciation in this vacant land, and they were having a hard time paying the taxes, but they didn't really want. They wanted to buy something to build a home to live in. Like, well, you can't. You can buy the vacant land and then wait, and then build, but they were ready to go. I go, look, think of it this way. What amazing that in 4 years you made $200,000 on this property, and guess what? You're gonna have to pay some taxes on it. But now you can turn around and build your dream home and wait. I was telling the gal, trust me, to wait a couple years to build your home price, cost to build isn't gonna go down. And you're gonna live somewhere else while you sit on this land to wait to build. So you can avoid $40,000 in taxes? Right? Because they were lucky they were in Washington. They didn't even have to worry about Oregon taxes. So sometimes people just need the permission to do that. Just pay the taxes. But usually when they see how much it's gonna cost them, they don't like to do it. Death. Death is a really permanent exit strategy, but it does have some benefits. Seller financing, okay? So people can utilize that as an exit strategy. It can either be a diversification or an exit. Exchange into it, later convert into my retirement home. So I definitely have people who are planning the future
permanent home. Estate planning. There's never a plan until there's never a problem until there's money. So planning for passing it on to the heirs is important, especially if there's multiple children or people that could be disputing. The more planning they do, and that's another area, they don't know where to go for expertise. And that is one of the biggest mistakes is people think that they don't need a trust because they don't have that much in assets, and it's not true. You do realize in Oregon, it's only $1 million before there are taxes on an estate. It's very low. It's very low. People need a plan for their passing. It's not really every estate attorney I've ever talked to talks about the type of humor they have to have because they're talking about someone's death and the plan of it. What happens after you die? Okay, so maybe I want to go into a low maintenance asset, triple net. So we already talked about triple net, a tenants in common, a TIC. Those have kind of been making their way up. So it's like, up in Portland, there seems to be a lot of talking about syndications. Has that gotten kind of popular down here? Where a group of people put their money together or pool into big assets. Okay, they'll come, don't worry. So, but that a tenant in common is really where a group of people come together and then buy into a bigger asset. A Delaware Statutory Trust or DST, that's a securitized option, similar to a REIT, but a REIT is not eligible because it doesn't meet the like-kind requirement because you're buying into a partnership holding. This is where you're going to take a shared beneficial ownership interest in the real estate. Probably one of my top exit strategies for investors is going into DSTs because it's completely passive. They get monthly income, they get debt replacement, they get appreciation, depreciation. It can be passed on to their heirs. All of that has a lot of really great benefits. So gifting versus inheriting. Okay, so people can gift the real estate. The downside to doing that is you take on their cost basis. So if mom gifts me her property, I take on her cost basis. So if I sell it, I get to pay the taxes on the gain. Okay? Now I've had several family members gift to family. They knew that they were taking on the cost basis. There are things they have to do with their tax advisor to do it properly. And then they've done the exchange with the understanding that their cost basis was the basis of their parent. Okay? Do any of you guys belong to the Masters in Real Estate Facebook page? Oh, you're not. You're just missing the train wrecks. Like, okay. When I'm bored and want to be entertained by people, I look at that. So one day there was somebody who was like, "Oh, my client's in trouble with IRS because they were gifted this real estate and they sold it and everything." I didn't chime in, but I was like, they are not in trouble with the IRS for the real estate that was gifted to them. They thought they could sell it and not have any taxes, is what happened, right? So, let's just say mom gives it to you, and you sell it for $1 million, and you're like, hey, I got my $1 million, hey, and then the IRS is like, you do realize like $800,000 of that's taxable, right? Because mama's cost basis was $200,000. And you just made $800,000 that is now taxable. Now, it's long-term capital gains if you've had it long enough, so 15%, maybe 20. Not horrible, but they thought they got their money free. That's what they thought. Because the person was like, I need to figure out how much it was worth when it was gifted to them. Like, no. They need to figure out how much it was worth when mama bought it, right? Because that's the cost basis that becomes the taxable amount. So when people think they're avoiding this tax, they're taking on this tax. So understand though, capital gains tax rates are lower than inheritance tax. Inheritance tax is a higher tax rate. Now, what happens when I inherit it, I get what's called a step up in basis. So same example, mom's cost basis is $200,000. She passes away, the property is worth $1 million. The estate could sell the property and pay 0 capital gains. Now, federally, the level is $12.5 million before you pay any estate taxes. That is dropping down after the first of the year and about half to that. And like I said, Oregon is $1 million. So anything above $1 million is going to be taxable to the estate. Okay? So that's the difference between gifting and inheriting. there are a lot of high net worth individuals that are rapidly doing, so that we always think of, well, their yearly gifting is like 17,000. Lifetime gifting is $14 million. So lifetime gifting and yearly gifting are two different things. The lifetime gifting threshold is also going down after the first 3 years. So a lot of high net worth individuals are gifting while the level is higher because they know the estate level is going down. Okay? Not a problem I have. I wish sometimes. Okay, combining seller financing with an exchange. How am I doing on time, guys? Okay, we started late. Do I get a couple more minutes? Okay. All right, so go back to the basics. When I want to start talking about something complicated, go back to what is a fully tax deferred exchange? Equal or greater value, all the cash back in. Okay? If I want to do an exchange, I have to keep in mind that the note is part of the consideration of that sale and is considered legal tender. It's a cash equivalent, only it's not cash, right? So if I want to do the exchange, the best way to do it is I'm going to buy that note with outside cash. So let's say I'm selling for $1 million, my buyer comes in with 500, they want me to do a note for 500. My buyer comes in with 500, I come in with 500. My note and deed is separate, so now I'm the lien holder on the property I just sold. My $1 million goes into the exchange and I buy a new property. It's great for diversification, okay?
Sorry, I have to get kids from school.
No, you told me before you even came in and I'm after 3, so you're good, okay? So, that's one. I can use it as a diversification. So if somebody's got money in the bank, not making a lot of money, and they want to make better money, though I did see, I want this deal. Buyer sends an offer in with a 10-year note, 3% interest only payment. Yeah, sign me up for that deal. I'm like, are you serious? And the seller's like, yeah, we're not taking that. But it was really aggressive. I think that's the nice way of putting it. I was like, when I read the terms, I'm like, 3% interest only for 10 years. Yeah.
Was it on the market a long time?
Not long enough for that, but you know, they always, it's like, we'll just float the balloon to see how desperate the seller is. The seller's like, I'm not desperate. No. All right. So the other way is I can use it as an exit strategy. So like I said, capital gains is typically 15 to 20%, but if my income level is threshold is low enough, my federal taxes might be at 0 for long-term capital gains. With the installment sale procedure under the 453, what it's saying is, as I receive principal payment, I will realize the gain. They're saying you're only going to realize the gain as you receive money through the installment procedure. So basically, I receive principal payment and interest each year. I have the interest income for the interest payments, and then the principal payment is realized gain. So if the amount my buyer's bringing in is above my cost basis, because I can buy down, but if it's below my cost basis, I'm just going to realize all my gains, because I'm never going to pay more gain than my full gain. So if it's above my cost basis, I can exchange the down payment and then realize the balance over the term of the note. If the amount of the note is below my cost basis, then the first chunk is going to be realized gain with the balance over the term of the note. The problem is people want to do an interest only, like this guy, 10-year, and that's what I told the seller, because it was the seller I'm working with. I go, the problem with this is that you're doing an interest only for 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, when they pay off the note, or it also said no prepayment penalty, so they can pay it off at any time. Once they pay that loan off, that's when you're going to realize all your gain. You're not even spreading it out over time, okay? What happens is people come to me after their year of their interest-only note, and now the buyer's paying the note, and now they want to do an exchange. Exchange happens at the point of sale, not when the note's paid, okay? Exit strategy or diversification. If you are talking to somebody and you're trying to get creative because maybe financing is challenging because of the property type, and they're like, yeah, I'll do a seller carry, but then the next thing you know, they also want to do an exchange. Make sure they're talking to somebody before they sign on anything. Because what could happen is they think they're gonna be able to do an exchange, they have no money to buy the note, and don't realize that they're gonna realize all their gain. So we need to be sure that they're talking to somebody before they agree, especially if they wanna do an exchange. And I mentioned DSTs already, this kind of goes over them. There we go. And the rest just comes from Amy and team, right? So they'll be able to help you with trying to come up with so think about, do I want a newer investor? Do I want someone who's at the end of their investing? Do I want somebody who's not local? What kind of property type? And then work on coming up with a very specialized list of people, and then come up with your marketing message for a year. You will build a business out of it, I promise.
So we do have